Hi. Official recaps here. Today, I'm going to explain a film from 2017 called Stephanie. Before getting to the video, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like to support the channel. Stephanie is a 9-year-old child who has been abandoned by her parents for unknown reasons. She lives alone in her home and barely takes care of herself. Her only companion is a plush turtle toy named Francis. Stephanie's typical day includes viewing cartoons, playing the piano, making smoothies for herself, and spending time with Francis the turtle. When Stephanie switches on the television one day, the news channels broadcast the world's bleak situation, in which some supernatural forces are wreaking mayhem in various countries. They also stated that a strict quarantine has been declared and that people are being requested to remain in their homes. Stephanie, on the other hand, pays no attention to such things and simply switches to her cartoon channel. As a 9-year-old, she is clumsy at everything she does and frequently makes a mess of the house. Stephanie is preparing a smoothie in the kitchen when she hears a loud noise emanating from upstairs. The little girl rushes there, terrified, only to discover a ball falling as if someone is inviting her to play. Stephanie screams at him or her and returns to the kitchen, not knowing who he or she is. Unfortunately, she steps on a shattered piece of glass, causing her to scream in agony. But, with no one to watch over her, she swiftly regroups and limps upstairs, where she grabs a first aid kit and tends to her wound. Stephanie prepares dinner and gives it to the family of 4 later that night. 2 for her parents, 2 for her sibling, and 2 for herself. After reading a story to her toy Francis, she brushes her teeth and goes to bed. Stephanie puts Francis on the floor the next morning and encourages him to play conceal and seek. She then enters a room and conceals inside a makeshift tent. While she is going through a family photo album, Stephanie hears the sound of a dangerous creature outside the home. She closes her mouth and tries to stay silent, terrified. The creature hurls near Stephanie but then flees when it sees no one. Stephanie cautiously emerges from her tent and approaches the wind window to inspect the creature. Unfortunately, she sees no one, and it concludes that the creature has fled into the adjacent woods. She then informs Francis that the monster dislikes noises and that they should remain quiet. Stephanie is playing football with Francis in the afternoon when she sees her pet rabbit, Mr. Hopper, wandering around the yard. Stephanie asks Mr. Hopper to wait a moment before hurrying to the kitchen to make some food for him. After a while, she returns with a bowl full of tomato sauce, attempting to entice Mr. Hopper back inside but failing as the rabbit hops towards the woodlands. After that, while Stephanie is cleaning her teeth at night, the power goes out, scaring her. She then rushes to her sibling Paul's room and takes his hand in her own. The hand appears pale and weak, as if he is already dead, but when Stephanie begs Paul to defend her, he agrees. His hand moves slowly, implying that he is being controlled by a supernatural power. Now, at night, she hears a loud bang by the window, which scares the daylights out of her. She walks slowly and warily to Jack, only to discover blood all over the place. Following the trail, the little girl discovers her pet rabbit Mr. Hopper, who is severely injured and bleeding on the table. Enraged, she approaches Paul's room and blames him for the rabbit's death and their parents' departure. She then picks up a baseball bat and begins bashing his corpse, which is lying on the bed. The cloth that was covering Paul's cranium slips, revealing his decomposed visage. The following night, it rains, and the electricity goes out once more. Stephanie goes downstairs to get some candles and sees the washing machine shaking violently, as if someone is trapped inside. She runs directly to her makeshift tent and sleeps late at night, terrified. Stephanie goes downstairs to investigate after hearing someone open the door and discovering water all over the floor. She believes that someone has broken into the house, and when lightning strikes, it is obvious that someone is standing behind her back. Stephanie goes to the toilet and locks herself inside, terrified. The footsteps begin to approach him, causing her to close her lips in horror. Her parents, Eric and Jane, have returned to visit her, much to her astonishment. After all of this, the young girl returns to her parents and rests with them. Jane changes her clothes in front of Stephanie the next day, thinking she is sleeping. The little girl is aware, and she looks back at her mother. Stephanie is terrified by some odd dot-like scars on her mother's belly. She later observes her father carrying wooden blocks, attempting to build a fence around the house. Stephanie hurries to her brother's room, but there is no sign of his body. She then walks into the woods, without informing anyone, in quest of her brother. But, to her surprise, she discovers that her folks have already buried Paul in the backyard. The little girl is furious and frantically attempts to dig out the body with her hands, but her parents call her. When Stephanie returns home, her mother, Jane, warns her not to leave the fence without authorization. The little girl agrees, but expresses her wish for Paul to return home. Stephanie asks her mother why she left her alone in the home the next morning while eating pancakes. Jane responds that it was not her decision, because they thought Stephanie had been captured by the monster. When the little girl hears this, she informs her mother that the monster lives in the woods and will attack them whenever there is chaos or noise inside the house. She also describes remaining silent and calm when the monster enters the house. Later that night, an unseen force brings Paul's dead corpse back to the house through the window. Both parents are saddened to see this because they had just buried their son with heavy emotions. Stephanie, on the other hand, reacts normally, as if nothing has occurred. During dinner, she questions Eric if the monster has returned her brother, and Eric confirms it. He also informs Stephanie that the monster is after her and will follow them. Stephanie secretly enters her mother's room in the next scene, where she discovers numerous newspaper articles posted on a board with little children like her. While committing heinous crimes, she reads a book on the table and discovers that Jane is actually attempting to study brain surgery and its processes. While she is browsing through other posters, Stephanie hides under the table as Jane hurries into the room. Jane appears concerned, and when she sees the brain images, she loses her cool and tosses them away. Stephanie is seen chilling in the bathtub, and when Eric approaches her, he informs her that the beast is not an outside force, but only as a result of her negative feelings, so she must control herself and strive not to let the negative feelings take over. Stephanie agrees politely, but questions her father why she was left alone. Eric becomes emotional as he whispers that he was scared and didn't know what to do to save his family. Stephanie goes downstairs at night and hears her parents discussing how to keep her under control. Eric appears to believe that Stephanie can control her feelings, but Jane believes otherwise and proposes that they perform a brain procedure. Stephanie, who is hearing all of this, says nothing and returns to her room to slumber in her dream. She hears a strange sound emanating from the other side of the entrance door, slowly walks towards it, and sees that it is already open, but as she approaches it, it suddenly closes, terrifying her. Regardless, she carefully opens it again and discovers her father's ghost on the other side. With this, she begins to scream and finally awakens from her nightmare. Stephanie, on the other hand, is still not persuaded that it was all in her head. As a result, she goes downstairs and stands in front of the same door, but her parents come and console her. Stephanie informs Eric that the monster killed him in her fantasy. As soon as she states this, the front door swings open, and an unseen paranormal force drags Eric out. Jane carries Stephanie and takes her to a hiding spot, inside a closet, when she notices this. Stephanie requests that her mother stay calm and silent so that the monster does not hear them and returns. After a while, everything falls quiet, and Jane emerges from the closet to look around. When she sees nothing, she assures the little girl that everything is fine. However, when she asks Stephanie to join her, she is terrified by the same unseen force. Stephanie dashes into a room, snatches Francis, and leaps out the window. She injures herself in the process, but immediately gets back up and attempts to scale a ladder and return to the house. Eric and Jane attempt to stop her, but they are powerless against the unseen force, which appears to be emanating from the little girl herself. Fortunately, Jane uses her final power to pull Stephanie down the ladder. However, their problems are far from over. As the parents lie on the ground, a strange creature with tentacles attacks them from all directions. Jane orders her daughter to halt, but the little girl is so terrified that she refuses, but before any harm is done, Jane pulls out a chloroformed handkerchief and places it against Steph's forehead, putting her to sleep. Now that the creature has been silenced, Jane informs Stephanie that you are the monster. Stephanie wakes up the next day and apologizes to her parents for leaving the house without their approval. Eric consoles her and informs her that she is a monstrous insider. That is, with the help of some pendulum balls, she is controlling her activities and her thoughts, which is very comforting. He then attempts to mesmerize Stephanie and inquires as to what she did to Paul. The little girl closes her eyes and discloses that while she and Paul were carving pumpkins for Halloween, he began teasing her, which is why she attacked him with all her arms, i.e. tentacles. After stating this, she becomes violent once more. Jane, on the other hand, soothes her down with a vaccine. Following this, Stephanie's parents take her to an operating room, where Jane begins to cut her head open. Eric attempts to prevent his wife from doing so. However, she states that it is the only way to keep her alive and secure. It comes out that she wants to get rid of the monster by performing brain surgery. Unfortunately, just as the procedure is about to commence, the possessed little girl regains consciousness and uses her powers to destroy the entire lab. In the following scene, Eric is watching the news, which discusses a medical procedure that is being used all over the world to treat children like Stephanie. Has gone wrong, and a significant number of doctors and other medical personnel have died as a result. The medical procedure was also mentioned in the news as the last chance for finding a cure. Now that it has failed, the only choice for the children suffering from this rare condition is to euthanize them. Stephanie acts as if nothing has occurred in the morning. On the other side, the parents plan to poison their daughter's hot chocolate. Eric then invites Stephanie to join him on a stroll in the woods. Stephanie apologizes to her father for hurting him while the father-daughter duo connects outside. Eric is moved by the remarks, but after a brief pause, he requests that his daughter consume the hot chocolate. But, just as she's about to consume it, her telekinesis powers throw the sipper away, and her face turns blue. She attempts but fails to control herself. After the incident, a distraught Eric was compelled to reach for his gun and shoot her numerous times. When he comes home, convinced that Stephanie has died, he sobs profusely and expresses his regret for what he has done. However, when he goes to bury Stephanie's corpse the next day, he discovers her standing at the back door of the fence. Stephanie throws Eric in the air with her telekinesis power after a dumbfounded Eric attempts to react. She then goes to the bathroom to locate Jane and drags her downstairs, mercilessly hitting her against the walls. She then stabs Eric with a knife and breaks Jane's bones, killing them both immediately, and informing them they should never have returned. In the final scene, she uses her telekinesis powers to destroy the entire home, drags her parents' corpses outside and dumps them at Paul's grave. She also demolishes the other houses in the area, after treading on her toy turtle, purportedly to show that she has been taken over by the police. Her shadow looks to have extended tentacles like a gigantic octopus. The film concludes with an aerial shot of the entire Earth, which has been totally destroyed by deadly fires. This suggests that several other telekinetic children are still living and kicking. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.